Asking you about your relationship, your country's relationship with two of the major powers in the world, the United States and Russia. I'll begin with the United States. By many people's accounts, the US-Turkey relationship is in a downward spiral. Earlier this year, the Vice President, Mike Pence, said that Turkey has a choice to make between being a strategic partner or making bad decisions that undermine that. You've criticized the US strategy in Syria, saying the US has no clear policy in Syria. And just this week, I'm sure you're fully aware, the United States Senate passed a resolution recognizing for the first time the Armenian genocide. Let me start by asking you, what is the state of the relationship between Turkey and the United States?
Thank you very much. Very nice to be here this year as well. Well, Turkey believes that US is still our ally, and we are actually a NATO ally. And our relations with the administration, Secretary Mnuchin is also here, is relatively better because President Trump understands and values our relations. And he is aware of the difficulties and the reasons of some of the problems. But when you look at the Congress side, we see it's still problematic. First of all, we don't have to choose between this and that. The countries in our region, I was underlying this during the lunch today, like Iraq, we don't have to choose between this country or that country. We can perfectly balance our relations. But at the same time, we are a NATO ally, and we are very much committed, and we have been contributing to NATO and NATO activities more than most of the other NATO members. So we still have outstanding issues. If you look at the issues from our side, we are expecting from the United States to disengage with a terrorist organization, YPG-PKK, which is a threat to our national security. Secondly, we have been asking the United States to extradite the leader of the terrorist organization that perpetrated the attempted coup. If you look at the request coming from the United States, US is asking us not to procure an air defense system from Russia, I mean S-400. So which one is vitally important for two allies? And this is a sovereign right of Turkey, and we are very desperate for an air defense system, and for the last 10 years, we wanted to procure it from our ally, United States, and other allies. It didn't work, and I had to buy from Russia because Russia made the best proposal. So this is a defense system that I need. So which one is vitally important for us? And Russia is providing S-400s, and they gave the best deal. And we have good relations with Russia, immediate neighbor, but we have also disagreement with Russia even on Syria, not only on Crimea or territorial integrity of Georgia, and now maybe we have different position in Libya, but 2 days ago, President Putin and Erdogan agreed to work bilaterally also to stop the bloodshed in Libya.
Yeah, we're going to get to all of that in Syria and Libya as well in just a moment. But let me circle back on the issue of the US-Turkey relationship. As you mentioned, you have some issues with the American Congress right now. And there is the threat by some members of Congress that the United States could possibly sanction Turkey for the purchase of the S-400 missile defense system. In the event that the United States sanctions Turkey, or that there is a stronger push for sanctions against Turkey, what would the Turkish response be? Would you retaliate against the United States for sanctioning Turkey?
Well, President Erdogan made it very clear when he was meeting some senators from the Republican Party at the office of President Trump that he will not let anybody to intervene the sovereign rights of sovereignty of Turkey. So S-400 is a done deal, and we cannot cancel this. This is for sure. Whatever the consequences is, this is the situation, and everybody has to admit this. From now, we are ready to buy Patriots from the United States if US is able to get consent from the Congress. I know that administration is okay, but if sanctions and threatening language never worked, and US should also understand, and I think they did understand, and President Trump is against sanction, but if there is a sanction coming from there, Turkey has to reciprocate. This is for sure.
What would that look like?
We don't want to, speak on the worst scenario in our relations. We are trying to overcome this without sanction and through dialogue, through understanding each other. In that case, I think we will also have to consider reciprocate.
What would that reciprocation look like?
Here, we have to see, first of all, in the worst scenario, what is coming from the United States, and then under the leadership of President Erdogan, and we will.
Let me ask you about social media for a moment, because I follow you on Twitter, and this week about the resolution that passed in the Senate, you had some very strong words. In fact, you said those who try to exploit history for political gains are cowards. Do you believe the U.S. senators who supported this resolution are cowards, or trying to achieve a political end?
I do still believe so, because the politicians with the limited knowledge about the history shouldn't judge the history. And I remember the statement of Madame Merkel after a similar resolution adopted by the Bundestag, that to define any history or what happened in the past as genocide as some requirements. So there should be a court judgment. It is not up to the politicians to decide whether it was a genocide or not. So we have been proposing United States as well to join the joint working group that we can establish together. This is the proposal of Turkey to Armenia. Just have a just establish a joint working group, and we can open the archives. Our archives are open. Russia can come in, and the United States and France, these are the countries who are most interested in this issue. And scientists, historians, anthropologists from both sides. And we, in advance, we actually announced that we will accept the outcome of this study. This is the way that we should deal the history. Those politicians and the congressmen and women, they're actually giving this decision because due to their disappointment of what we did in northeast Syria, and also due to the lobbies in the United States, like Armenian lobby, and the other lobbies also supported them after our operation against terrorist organization. So this shouldn't be the way, actually, that we deal the issues between us.
Let me move on to another topic that you raised, and that is the issue of Libya, another crisis that is unfolding in the Middle East. As we all know, this week there was an assault that was launched on the government of national accord, the UN-backed government, the internationally recognized backed government. President Erdogan has said that Turkey would send troops to defend the government of national accord if it was invited. Can you update us, as of this week, as of this moment, has the Turkish government been asked to send troops to defend the government of national accord?
Recently we signed 2 MOUs with the legitimate government in Tripoli, Sarraj government. One of them is on actually the security cooperation, which is about training and exchange of information and technology. And the second one is on the demilitation of the maritime jurisdiction areas on Mediterranean. And this is the agreement signed by 2 sovereign independent states. And according to the Sahrat agreement, the legitimate government can cannot sign intergovernmental agreement, but MOUs with any other countries. So President Erdogan, when he was put a question, he said that if the legitimate government requests Turkey to deploy some troops or some supports, Turkey will consider. So this is a very clear message.
Has that request been made yet, as of today?
No, not yet.
Okay, but you are prepared to send troops if it does come through?
Well, sending troops is the easiest way. Now Russia is there. Russia has been trying to be in Libya for the last 2 or 3 years. I was raising this issue at every platform. And now Russia also became an actor in Libya. Therefore, sending troops is a very easy thing. First, we should see the request, and we have to see what kind of request coming from the legitimate authority in Tripoli, and then we will consider.
You talk about Russia, and that is the other aspect of this multipolar issue that we wanted to discuss, the Turkish relationship. It seems for a lot of people on the outside that Russia is working against Turkish interests in the region. You just mentioned they're sending troops in Libya. They're backing the general who's carrying out this assault against the government in Tripoli. They have supported the government of Bashar al-Assad, which you have asked for the removal of. Explain how you can have a relationship with the Russian government selling you defense systems, but at the same time they're working against Turkish interests in the region?
Well, neither Libya nor Syria are the areas for competition between Turkey and Russia. But both countries are important actors. And in Libya, yes, we disagree that the so-called private company, I forget the name, in Libya is supporting Haftar. We are all against this, not only Turkey. But at the same time, when Putin proposed to work together to stop this civil war in the country, we said immediately yes. On Libya, yes, we disagree on Assad, but thanks to Astana meetings and Sochi format, we have made a lot of achievements in Syria. And thanks to Astana process, now today, Geneva process is alive. Thanks to Astana process or our cooperation with Russia, today we can talk about the Constitution Committee, even though the second round of the committee didn't go well due to the unacceptable and outrageous conditions that the regime side put. And we also disagree with Russia in Idlib. They have increased their aggression over there. This is what President Erdogan asked Putin to stop this aggression because they have been bombing schools and everywhere indiscriminately. Many civilians have been died and many tens of thousands of people has been already displaced. Yes, you can disagree, but you cannot say that Turkey and Russia are competing in both countries. Yeah, we disagree in certain areas, but we have been also working together to reach a lasting solution in Syria.
You're talking about Syria for a moment. Let me just be very clear. Is it the Turkish government's position as of today that President Bashar al-Assad must go, as it has been over the past several years?
Well, our position is very clear. We believe that a person who has killed more than 500,000 people cannot unite the country. This is our position. And so that's why this government is not legitimate, or the regime. But at the end, now we are paying more attention to the political process, and we can assume that this is a transition. And then if the country is prepared after a proper constitution for a democratic and fair election, at the end, it is the Syrian people should decide. But what we believe is very clear, and Assad cannot unite the country after what happened in the last 10 years.
So given the fact that you believe he cannot unite the country, and as you're saying, Russia is backing him to stay in power, are those two irreconcilable? That you're saying he can't unite the country, Russia's saying he is the person who's going to stay in power, and we're backing him with force.
Well, Iran also believes that he has to stay, but here at the end, it doesn't matter what they believe. At the end, the Syrian people should decide.
Let's talk a little bit then about Syria and Turkish military operations in the northern border, obviously something that has drawn a lot of condemnation. Can you give us a quick update on the ongoing military operations inside northern Syria as they stand today?
Well, our operation was against a terrorist organization, as two previous operations were. One of them was against Daesh, then the second one in Afrin was against this same terrorist organization, PKK, YPG. Well, we tried diplomacy with the United States. Upon the request of the United States, we tried to create a safe zone together. It was the proposal of President Trump to Erdogan. We immediately said it. At the end, it didn't work. It was just a delaying tactic of the United States. Meanwhile, they continue providing weapons to this terrorist organization, as well as training programs. At the end, we decided that it wouldn't work, and we started our operation. And we proved that we are still for diplomacy with the joint statement that we made with the United States in 5 days and the MOU that we signed with Russia in Sochi. And now we are trying to stabilize the region for Syrian people. And there are still YPG, PKK elements on the ground. They have killed more than 50 civilians recently, and they have to be withdrawn. Who actually promised to withdraw them? United States and Russia from different regions. So they have to also deliver, and we still continue working with both two major actors. And from now, if we can stabilize the region, we can actually facilitate the voluntary, safe, and dignified return to safe zones that we are cleaning from terrorists. And already 370,000 Syrians voluntarily went back to the two operation areas that I just mentioned. And already more than 70%, this is the figure that UN share, 70% of the IDPs went back to our operation area. It means that people are returning to these areas because it is safe. And as long as we provide their basic needs, more and more people will go back.
I have to ask you a little bit about that because, as you probably are aware, that has drawn a lot of international condemnation, saying that Turkey is trying to demographically alter the population of northern Syria, displacing Kurds and repopulating it with Arabs. What do you say to that charge? That
should I be diplomatic to answer this question, or can I be free?
I think you should speak as frankly as possible, because these are serious allegations that Turkey is trying to repopulate northern Syria.
This is black propaganda and it's nonsense. Why? So the people from this region who are in Turkey or in other neighboring countries, as well as northern Iraq, I mean, should be able to go back to their homes. When these people go back to their home, is it a demographic engineering? And there are 350,000 Syrian Kurds in Turkey, among 3.7 million Syrian refugees. So if these Syrian Kurds are able to go back to their homes in Kobani and there, elsewhere, is it a demographic engineering in favor of Kurds? Everybody should be able to go back to their homes. If they don't have any home left behind, if they are all demolished and destroyed or confiscated by YPG, and then we need to build the new ones for them, for the ones who are returning. Who did the demographic engineering? Everybody is claiming that the area that we enter is predominantly Kurdish area, but actually, this is a predominantly Arab region. And only 80% of the population of this region that we enter is Arab. And there are also minorities, Christian minorities, there are Turkmens. And if you should ask, actually, who did the demographic engineering to Christian minorities? These people have been screaming, but nobody wanted to hear their voice because of their engagement with this terrorist organization and because of the plan to create a terror statelet in this region. And these Aramean people, they have been screaming that PKK has been closing their schools, PKK has been, YPG PKK oppressing them and also recruiting their children forcibly, as well as the Kaldanis and the Yazidis in Iraq, for instance, but nobody is hearing this. So why these 350,000 Syrian Kurds in Turkey and more than 200,000 Syrian Kurds in northern Iraq couldn't go back to areas that has been controlled by YPG. Why? Because YPG forced them to leave. So YPG did the demographic engineering. And not only ethnically, but also ideologically. They forced those Syrian Kurds to leave because those Syrian Kurds, 350,000 and 200, almost 600,000 in total, didn't subscribe this Marxist, communist, Leninist ideology of YPG. That's why they were forced. I have no problem with the ideology, by the way. I respect all the ideologies subscribed by the political parties and by the people, but not terrorist organizations.
Let me ask you one other aspect about your operation in Syria, and that is human rights abuses committed and alleged war crimes committed by Arab forces backed by the Turkish military. This was a statement by Jim Jeffrey, the U.S. envoy to Syria, speaking in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, saying that the United States has evidence, and there are stories and reports, credible stories and credible reports, that these forces have committed war crimes in northern Syria.
Well,
is your government investigating those war crimes?
I think this is also part of the black propaganda. Nevertheless, whatever it is, whatever the accusation is, we have to investigate, and we have been investigating. We cannot tolerate this. And we conducted 2 other operations, I repeated 2 times, and there was no such claims. And all of them were baseless. Nobody proved that, there was a human rights violations. As Turkish troops, we are very sensitive. So all these accusations have been investigated, and 2 courts in the region has been already established. We cannot tolerate any human rights violations there or somewhere else. But this Free Syrian Army or Syrian National Army was supported by entire world when they are supporting us, when they were fighting against Daesh during the Operation Euphrates Shield, when they are fighting PKK, YPG, another terrorist organization, now everybody is criticizing them, and which is not fair. But if there is any violation, it has to be investigated, and the perpetrators should be held accountable.
Let me ask you just one last question before we run out of time. The U.S. Secretary of Treasury is here, Stephen Mnuchin. He's obviously a big champion of the sanctions on Iran, the maximum pressure campaign. You brought up the issue of Iran, and earlier today we were talking about whether sanctions are effective. Do you think the U.S. maximum pressure campaign on Iran has been successful? Do you agree with the Secretary of Treasury on that?
Has the United States got any outcome of this or any result?
Well, he'll be asked that question, I'm sure. He'll be asked that question coming up.
My answer is no.
Yeah.
I know that U.S. administration wants to engage or make another deal with Iran, and both sides are putting some conditions or preconditions. But at the end, who suffered? Iranian people suffered. And as Turkey, we are against sanctions. I believe that many European countries are also against sanctions, and that's why they are trying to make these new mechanisms in their trade with Iran, like Intex. More and more countries are joining, even though we haven't seen any implementation of this mechanism. So we are against sanctions, and instead of sanctions, I think more engagement can bring more outcome. It is not easy to deal with Iran. We are all aware of this. Iran, we are the immediate neighbor. And we are aware of the fact that it is not easy to make any kind of deal with Iran. But it doesn't mean that we should only try sanctions, but more engagement, I believe.
And let me just finally ask you, we're here obviously at the home of Al Jazeera, and it champions freedom of speech, freedom of expression. The Committee to Protect Journalists has put out its report this year. Turkey is number 2, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists, for the country that has the most arrested journalists in the world, with 47. More than 100 news organizations have been shut down. What do you say to people on the outside who say, like, Turkey is a democracy in the region, but at the same time is undergoing some of these crackdowns on press and free speech and news organizations inside Turkey?
First of all, we have to agree on the list. I just met the High Representative of Media of OSCE in Bratislava 2 days ago. The number of the people he gave me is even less than half of the figure that you just shared.
But even if it's one journalist,
even if it's one journalist,
look, there shouldn't be any journalist that's arrested for free speech.
This process has been very transparent. And if you look into the website of the Minister of Justice, you can see all these names as well as the accusations. And recently, some of the journalists actually released due to the legislation that we adopted at the Turkish parliament. And no journalist is in the prison because of their expression. But there are so-called some journalists that have been actively involved in the attempted coup. So can you be involved in any attempted coup in the United States or in your other countries like Egypt or in Lebanon or somewhere else or in Palestine? You cannot do that. Secondly, there are some so-called journalists who provided weapons to PKK terrorist organization. There should be a difference between a journalist that has been heavily criticizing Turkey, still criticizing the government and Erdogan himself and myself and everybody in the government, which is democracy, and the ones who are supporting the terrorist organizations. I don't mean the expression of their speech or just their coverage, but actively supporting the terrorist organization. So Turkey has been a democratic country. We transformed this country. It has been defined as the silent revolution in Turkey until 2013, I have to say. And then after Gezi event, we had another incident of this FETÖ, 17th and 25th of December attempt to overthrow the democratically elected government. It didn't work. Finally, in 2016, attempted coup. And we had to take immediate measures. Image of the country is important, particularly for a foreign minister. Okay, but if you ask me those days, which one was more important, image or the security of the country? Security of the country. Now we lifted the state of emergency, and we have been focusing on the reforms. And who are the main partners for us? Council of Europe, and also European Union, and the Council of Europe institutions, and all the institutions. And recently we hosted the Secretary General of the organization. And now we are working on the judicial reform strategy. The first phase was adopted by the Turkish parliament. That's why some journalists were released. And now we are working on the human rights action plan, and the contribution of these institutions is very valuable. So we are on the reform agenda again. We have to reform the country, and we need to also change the image of the country, and we need to explain this very well. So this is what we are committed. We are committed to democracy. Turkish people are committed to democracy. That's why they defeated the attempted coup in 2016.
Mr. Çavuşoğlu, I apologize for taking 6 minutes and 20 seconds extra of your time, but thank you very much, and I appreciate all of your frank answers to our conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.